Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to After the Roll, the Legend of Vox Machina. I am Travis Croken, one of your hosts, and I'm being joined by my other two hosts where we're going to break down Episode 7, Scanbo. How are you both doing tonight?
I didn't realize that was the episode name, and that makes me very happy. It is a very Scanlan episode.
It definitely is. It was a lot of fun. And I actually, so at the end of our last recording, Billy said something about Scanbo, and I was like, oh, did he just give something away? And completely didn't. Nothing was given away at all. But it was absolutely fantastic. So how are you tonight, Billy?
I'm doing well. This episode had a lot of fan service in it, so it's especially fun for me. But I'm excited to talk about it.
Nice. Yeah, there's some really fun key elements that I enjoyed about it. But again, it wasn't a standout episode for me for everything. It set up a lot of things. It was a preparatory episode, I found. If that's a word.
Yeah, it definitely was not my least favorite episode because I think the pilot is still my least favorite episode, but it is definitely low on my list. It was There's some things that I really enjoyed, mostly watching it the first time, and then watching it the second time, I was just like, no, I'm not forgiving you of this the second time.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Billy? Well, based on the fact that you're excited because it had a lot of fan service in there.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff in this episode that the community was very concerned wasn't going to happen, and that they desperately wanted to happen. And this episode kind of gave a lot of that to them. I was one of them. I was very happy.
That's fantastic, and I can't wait to hear more about that as we move forward with this episode. It was, like I said, it seemed like it was laying the groundwork for a lot of stuff. It still had the same humor, the same jokes, and everything. Like, it wasn't a bad episode. It was just not my favorite. And I find the further I'm watching into this season, the more I'm seeing that like I said, I understand what they did with episode 1, and it made sense. But I'm starting to see that they kind of did themselves a disservice. Because the show was so much more than they promised it to be from the beginning. And I think that first episode may have scared some people off that may have actually really enjoyed if they had stuck through with it. So hopefully they'll come back and take a look. Because I'm starting to see a bit of a disservice done to themselves.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could definitely see that. Yeah. There's a lot of substance to the story that you definitely wouldn't have realized was there, especially in that first episode with our puke counter and
There's a lot less puke. A
yeah,
lot less puke.
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
So I can completely understand that.
there's still a lot of bodily fluids. That was definitely a thing in this episode,
Yeah, quite
which,
very Tyrion Lannister.
yeah,
There is a lot
yeah,
of stuff. There is some shocking
was
stuff in this
not,
episode, so let's dive
yeah.
into it. What did everyone think of the cold open? Again, they've usually been nailing the cold opens. Did they nail this cold open again?
I mean, I think so. It gives the same kind of information that all the cold opens have been given. This one was a flashback to Percy and his sister's relationship, and also starts to introduce another one of the villains that is coming up. So I think that they did a perfectly fine job. I didn't think it was as exciting as some of the other ones, but it did its purpose.
It does its purpose. I was just watching it and doing you guys need a way better vetting process for your teachers because why would you trust someone who is so obviously slimy to tutor your children? How much do you dislike your children?
Yeah. Or how unpresent are you?
Yes.
Most
So
definitely.
like I think it is interesting because it does actually tell you a lot about his parents without having to give a ton of information by virtue of the fact that they were so not present with that. You know, that you have Professor Anders who is very much doing I dislike this family. I have utter disdain for these children and they don't value me. And there's no way that your kids don't pass that along unless you've made your environment so totally antithetical to having that kind of feedback from your kids. And given how pushy Anders is about Whitestone and the refinement, it's very much a like, how busy are you doing other things that you're not, that you've got this massive blind spot right in front of you, and what else was going on? So it begs a lot of questions the more you consider it.
Yeah. But it does also reinforce the relationship between him and Cassandra.
Yeah.
Right. Because if they really were the only two that they had among everybody, because their teachers didn't like them, they're, you're the kids of the masters, so most of the people that are working aren't going to like you. And the parents are gone, so they really were just had each other to be connected with. But again, I thought it was a good cold opening. Again, not anything I'm going to jump out of my seat about, but I found that it was fantastic in setting up, again, even just this episode. It set up, like, no matter how bad of a pain in the ass Cassandra was, he still loved her, he still cared for her, she was still a big part of his life. And we see that tie-in with Scanlan later on in the episode. And there's just a lot of kind of tie-ins, and again, groundwork being laid with the Whitestone and reactivity and all that other stuff. That as my first time watching that through, I was like, oh, that's important. That is going to come up again at some point down the road with the reactivity of the Whitestone and the other stones around them and all these other things. So again, very much a setup, cold open. But it was interesting. It wasn't boring. It didn't lose me.
Yeah. And as a obnoxious younger sibling who absolutely would have done the same kinds of things to my older brother, it very much felt real, of the amount of the love-hate that you can have for your 13-year-old little sister, because there is a 5-year gap between me and my older brother. So I can definitely see the way that, Percy talks about Cassandra later, of the, like, she's just so annoying and all of these things. And that doesn't change the fact that he absolutely loves her dearly. And it's very sibling true.
Yeah. That definitely is a thing. And I gotta say, for me, it's the same with my sister. She's 5 years older than me. And we used to live in the woods. And I used to spend all my time running through the woods, having fun, relaxing, just goofing off. So when I was bored, I would go in and irritate the hell out of her and get her so angry that she would start chasing me. And then I'd just run into the woods and she'd end up getting lost.
Yep.
Because that's what irritating
Sounds about right.
do. So, but we do get more of the backstory of the professor. We get more of the backstory of Cassandra, the Whitestone, the Residium, how all that works. And then we jump into the story where they're running through the streets, not walking because they've done their escape. And Keyleth pauses to look at the bodies still hanging from the sentry.
Yeah, I'm partial to it. I think that it's excellent to showcase that. Again, they are taking time to let you understand the kind of people that you're dealing with without having to take a lot of time to really dig into it. It's nice to be able to just show, look, they did this terrible thing. It's traumatizing our heroes actively. Done.
Yeah. And they showed how in-depth it went. They had actually, because when I first saw them hanging there and a couple of glimpses we saw, I was like, did they glue the horns on, or what did they do with the horns? And then in this, you see that they're not glued on. They're either forced into the skull or somehow forced to grow out of the skull. Either way, it looked excruciatingly painful when we saw the close-up of the girl with her head down. And the horns definitely seemed to be physically oppressive for her.
Yeah, they took their time. They made it work. And, Vedmire was very proud of his work. So, as, he probably should be, I guess.
Yeah,
it worked. It's effective.
We got the confession from Vedmire later in the episode. Yep. So what are your thoughts, Billy, on where this scene is and where it takes us?
Yeah, no, I agree with LJ. I think that the ability that the writers did with showing how much this is psychologically affecting the heroes in such a short span of time is really good. And I thought that this scene fit in very well. Like, instead of just having a generic, we're running back to the hideout scene, they took a 1, 2, 3 seconds and showed you how much this is affecting Keyleth specifically, who in the previous episodes we see that the guilt of these people dying potentially for them is painful to her. She's struggling with that. So I thought it was very well done, very quick, and hopefully something that people remember as the story continues.
Yeah, because it does. That's something they do handle impressively well with this series, is the psychological aspect of everything. And it's not just that they hit the bell once or twice on, oh look, we're hip, we're into it, we can show that we've taken in PTSD into account. It's actually like every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and they show that reaction in some way, shape, or form. They really do go into the reality behind what's happening, not just, look, there's this really cool fight scene, this really evil thing that was done.
I think it also goes to show that you never go to those kinds of extremes unless you're afraid. So it is very much the Vox Machina has Silas and Delilah worried enough that it was we need to kill a bunch of people to then hang their effigies off of the tree just in case they come, and help demoralize the town that little bit more, because we can't afford to have these people doing the same thing that they've done in the past and get in the way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack with it.
So I would argue that it has less to do with them being afraid and more to do with them having fun. I think that this isn't something that necessarily was to be like, don't come here, look what we're going to do. It's more of a, look what we're going to do.
I think it's both. I think there is very much an element of them enjoying toying with Vox Machina, but I think the fact that later on you have oh god, I don't remember the short evil one's name, but you have him and Vedmar demanding to know about Vox Machina, I think shows that there is some concern to go along with the bravado and to go along with the toying, because I think that these are also two villains that are smart enough to recognize threats and not necessarily always underestimate them, even when they have solidly trounced Vox Machina up until now.
Well, that's where I would kind of disagree, though, is because I agree with the idea of that being a bit of a anxiety and an admission of we can't just walk out and blast these irritating gnats away. So I think there's a bit of a fear and a bit of like almost a respect that's being shown there by what they're doing with these things. And I agree with Billy's perspective on this as well, like with the toying. But they faced off against Vox Machina one-on-one. Like they themselves fought them face to face, and they trounced them, but they didn't defeat them, and they lost their man. And then they sent the wraiths, 3 wraiths after Vox Machina, and didn't get the book, and didn't defeat them. And then they sent the zombie dire wolves after
the puppies.
And they got the book, but they didn't defeat Vox Machina. So they're like throwing the playbook at them, and Vox Machina is still plowing forward and getting to where they are. So I think there's a little bit of you know what, we can't just walk out and swat these gnats away. We have to mess with them. We have to demoralize. We have to take these extra things. It's fun, but we need to break the group before we face off against them in reality in the end, is kind of the way that I was taking it.
Yeah. I appreciate that there's enough to it that it can be chewed through. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, because it is toying. It is, I think, a bit of fear. And I think it's also just like they trounced them, but they've not been defeated yet, and their spirit hasn't been broken yet, which is something I've actually anticipated happening before we got to this point.
So I could definitely agree with that, except for the fact that the reason why they weren't defeated in their one-on-one battle isn't because they weren't going to be defeated. If you remember the end of that battle, Vox Machina was for sure on the back foot, and there were heroes that were about to like straight up die. The reason why the villains had to run away and they lost a man is just because other people were coming. It had nothing to do with the strength of Vox Machina. And although they have fought off these other beasts and entities that have been thrown at them, that's because they weren't the focus point of this couple. Vox
That's
Machina
good.
has been a backseat, like, we don't even need to deal with this ourselves. We're just going to send minions at you.
That's a good perspective too. Like LJ said, there's a lot to tear through on this and to dig into it. So, but it's neat to see though that, again, Vox Machina is not exactly a super strong group, but they're resilient and they work well together when they work together. They do a great job on that.
They are obnoxious when it comes to that.
Yeah.
When you're cheering for the villains.
But then we have the face-off against Vax and Percy in the basement of the tavern. This is a very tense scene.
I loved it.
Same.
Because, Percy was out of control. And the fact that Percy won't recognize that he's out of control is even scarier. And when, I mean, it's one thing if like Vex points an arrow at you, because there's a chance you're going to survive that, and it is going to hurt, but it's not going to do as much damage or pain and suffering as that pepper box does. And Vax has gotten to see how much damage and how much pain and suffering Percy can do with that pepper box. So to have it pointed at him, especially after, when there is, a corpse on the floor that has been blasted apart by this thing, and then to have Percy just doubling down, doing I wouldn't have shot you. Everything was fine. You don't need to have such a snit fit about it. Is very much the like, dude, you were inches away from shooting me in the face.
In a battle rage.
That's not cool. So.
Yeah. He was definitely in a battle rage at that moment for that. And he still didn't, like Vex said, like she said, you have to tell us the truth. You promised to give us the truth on this stuff. And he kind of did. He didn't go all the way. He doesn't explain what the dark magic is. He doesn't explain how the things are emblazoned. He alludes to the fact that he had to make a promise. And he promised to go after everyone that was on his list. Whether or not that promise was to himself or to some other entity remains to be seen in this. But he's still not being forthright and forthcoming with everything that's going on.
And I think that's something that everyone can see by virtue of how he is not giving all of the information. Even when Scanlan called out the like, do you always just make the weapons that you dream up? Like, dude.
Yeah.
What the hell?
And he makes the comment of this isn't the first.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he alluded to the fact that there's been other weapons that he's developed because of this.
I want to know what else is in that fantastically tiny bag that has everything in it, apparently.
Yeah, I love
how many guns and how many other things are in there.
I love that they have that bag in this. It's great that it's been included. But what did you think of that whole scene with Vax and Percy, Billy, and the backstory that he gave? Like, do you feel like that was anywhere near enough of what he should have been doing, or is...
Sure. So like LJ was saying again, I thought it was a really well done scene because it brought us back to the humanity of the group where, you're not just going to shrug off having this kind of weapon shoved in your face. And the difference that she was saying too about like the difference between Vex's weapon and Percy's weapon, even beyond that, even if Vex had that weapon and was the one that did it, she wouldn't have had the look in her eyes that Percy just had, which is, I imagine, is the thing that scared Vax the most. Like, what was going on with this guy at this moment? Holy crap, dude.
Yeah.
It's troubling to see how easy it is for him to shrug it off. I'm glad that he opened up as much as he did, but as you stated, it's obvious to anyone that's in the room except maybe Grog that there's more there. There has to be more there. This isn't quite, the pieces aren't quite fitting together as neatly as they should be. And hopefully it's not the downfall of Percy or anyone else that's on the other end of the gun. like that poor kid that had his hand blasted off.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with it, right? Is that he doesn't just, like you said, if Vax or Vex or anyone else had the gun, they wouldn't have had that battle crazed look in their face, and like, 'cause he was in a battle rage, and when he is using, we've seen him fire the pepper box, and it fires like a normal gun, but then he can put his magic into it or whatever it is, his dark aura into it, and make it become this completely different level weapon that he has. And it changes him as well. We see this. It makes him dark. And he doesn't just shoot to kill. He shoots to torture, to maim, to cause pain and suffering. And then he kills. So Vax or Vex or anyone else would not have that if they were pointing the gun at anybody else, right? It becomes a new persona. It's like putting on a mask for him. Well, literally, he puts on the death mask.
Which he does.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is that no one else, if I recall correctly, nobody else has tortured an informant before. None of the other characters have done that. And we've now seen Percy twice very cavalierly decide, my life and my desire is worth more than your life, than your, than the fact that you should be able to live your life as a whole person instead of a disabled person. So it very much is there is something very dark and very problematic as soon as he pulls out that mask and puts it on. And I like seeing the descent into this darkness, especially given when he kills, what's his name? Stoneheart?
Stonefell.
Whoever he is. He's not important, really.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. The fact that, he takes off the mask and his eyes are wrong.
Yeah.
And he does the, I want you to know who it is. And it's the, okay, but who are you in this moment? You're not fully Percy anymore. You're not being Percy. Not the Percy that we have always seen. So it's a really interesting scene. And then when he turns around, and you have to wonder if Vax saw his eyes change.
Yeah.
And if that even was part of it too, of the like, holy shit, dude, what the hell is wrong with you on like 10 different levels here? Like, there's so much going on, I don't even know what to deal with first.
Exactly. Like, they dealt with the black smoke, and he's like, oh, that's just my pepper box gives off smoke when you fire it. Out of his collar and out of his sleeves and this stuff. So if they see the eyes change, there's definitely a lot more added onto it. And it almost seems like he's trying to parse out his... What was that?
It's because the smoke was in my eyes.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. Yeah. This damn pepper box. But it almost seems like he's trying to... Or he feels like he can rid himself of his pain by causing excruciation on other people. If I torture them, if I make them feel as fraction as bad as I've been made to feel because of all of this, then my pain levels are going to come down because I'm painting it out onto them, which we all know is not going to happen. The way he is thinking it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of things not going the way we think they're going to happen, the Sun Tree. There's quite a scene with the Sun Tree and Keyleth.
Setting things on fire is bad. Maybe don't summon the sun besides some brittle dried out roots. Pro tip. From someone who has a black thumb when it comes to gardening.
I don't really know. I mean, I think
thinking was not her strong suit there.
Yeah.
No.
Obviously Keyleth has a real close bond with plants specifically, and animals. We see that when they are traveling to find the dragon, and when they discuss, hey, we should ask around to find out if anyone has any information, and she immediately goes to a tree and starts asking a tree. So this is just another iteration of showing that she's really connected to these plants. And we see that the tree seems to be being stunted less from what's happening above ground and more because something's happening underground.
It's been poisoned or tainted or something.
Yeah.
It's holding it back.
Zippity zapped.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if it is a case of the life force of this tree is being used as fuel for whatever Delilah is doing with it. Because we have with Anders talking in the beginning about refining Whitestone into Residium and how it does magical, really cool, important things. It's well, this is given us a valid reason why the Briarwoods came here of all places. Yeah. So if she's stealing the life force of the Sun Tree or whatever, how is that being used then to refine the Residium? Is that being used to refine and corrupt it? I have many questions regarding what exactly the purpose of this is, or if it's just I don't think that it is something that is just I feel like destroying things, so I am destroying things and using my magic to do so.
Yeah. So they really hit the beat of the Residium and him wanting to triple the output, and the Masters really had no idea, had no interest in even listening to it and entertaining the concepts. So that could lead to an idea of, if him thinking that if we were to tap into the tree and do these different things, then we can, because we don't hear what his plan is of how to triple the output for that. So I think that could be a very valid argument that there is something more to do with, because obviously Residium is tied into this massively somehow.
Oh yeah.
But the tree does catch on fire. But I forgot there's something I wanted to address on before the flaming tree. Percy alludes to a sixth name on the gun. So there's 5, and then Scanlan says, well, whose name is the 6th? And he says something cryptic about the other person I'm after. Any concepts or ideas or suggestions on who that could be? Who's the mysterious 6th person?
I mean, we can go dark here. There's suicide is a valid option at the end of all of this. So
that's what my thought jumped to. Is a yet unrevealed enemy or suicide? Because he feels bad for leaving his sister behind.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's either I'm leaving it blank just in case somebody else shows up, or it's the potential of this is my name at the end because I have nothing left to live for. And yeah, I think it will be interesting to see.
Or it could be part of a pact.
Yeah.
If he sells his soul to get the dark magic to do what he needs, then the last bullet is to take his own life to pay his end of the pact.
Yeah.
So
it will be interesting.
Again, a lot of things, just to be said, a lot of things set up in this episode. And there's a lot of fun with it as well. But then, so the tree gets caught on fire. Vax finds, much to Grog's chagrin, a barrel of ale and puts the fire out, throwing Grog into his first murderous rage of the episode.
Yes. And for anyone who is doing it's alcohol, it would have gone more on fire. It's such a low alcohol content, it absolutely would have put it out.
Yeah, not with ale. It definitely would have. You need at least 40% or more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Grog...
Which means that it was a really high proof alcohol that Grog gave up during the prison break when he threw that and Vex put it, or Vex, Vex. When Vex shot it and it did end up actually setting all of the guards on fire, they were drinking some very high proof stuff.
Well, that barrel did have a skull and crossbones on it.
Yeah.
So kind of gives you the idea.
It was the whiskey.
But they do put out the fire, and then of course they obviously freak out on Keyleth for doing what she did. And it seems like Keyleth has got some really important information that she just can't get out, because every time she gets close to being able to explain what's happening, someone starts yelling at her for something.
It sucks to have anxiety is really what it comes down to, I think, with her, because she is just so small emotionally. She doesn't take up space in the room the way that everyone else does. So when she wants to say something, you can see how much she has to fight for time and fight for space that everyone else just kind of just takes, So yeah, it is interesting to see that, she has important information that just doesn't get communicated presently. you know, because as I said, like she sees that there's this massive curse destroying the tree. That might be pertinent information for everybody else to know too, but nobody knows it right now because nobody gives her time to speak.
Yeah, it's a great use of
And
range.
she also has a lot of like the best intentions going awry. Like I feel very much that Keyleth is a person who walks that, you know, path to hell paved with good intentions, because so often it's like, oh, I'm trying to fix the tree. I set it on fire. Whoops.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit the dragon with lightning. Makes it stronger.
It's a lightning dragon. GG.
Yeah. That's exactly it. But they do a really good job of playing on her anxiety, and they do it in subtle ways, and they also do it at the instant there's a pushback. Like had that been Scanlan would have been, yeah, but I know, but listen, like there's this thing, and like okay, I caught it on fire. That's cool, whatever. But there's this thing you need to know. With her, as soon as they pounce on her, she just recoils, puts her head down, and tries to disappear from the room. And that information is lost.
Speaking of Scanlan doing the but hold up. I appreciate the quote and the way that they animated the "let me be annoying." Because that was very, very Scanlan. Jumping ahead a little bit, but you know.
Yeah. Well,
still.
Yeah. that scene I found was great. That whole thing, and Grog really fed into that scene so much. But for this, we actually just have the rest of this scene. Really is that Archie wants to use the Derulo name as a firebrand, mind the pun, to pull everyone forward and say that, you know, this is, you know, the Derulos are back, the true heir is here. Let's do this. Let's move forward. And Percy,
there's a lot of selfishness with Percy with that too, with his inability to want to be the heir, because it is not about him and it's not about power and anything to do with that. It's hey dude, your city that you were responsible for, or you were going to be responsible for, needs you. So suck it up and be there for it. And he's just doing I just got to go kill some people and then be done.
Yeah, I just want my sister. But that also brings up a thing that I forgot to mention from earlier when he's talking about his backstory, where how he made the pepper box, and he's lying in the street, and he thought the Derulo name was going to be a curse or a negative attractor, which again brings back my question, which I don't know if you were here for this episode, LJ, but I was talking to Billy about the fact that when they first come into this town, first come back into Whitestone, someone sees the crest on his buttons and says, like, you've got the Derulo crest. Like, why do you have that crest? So if he felt that the Derulo name was going to be a target, and he left everything behind and lived penniless on the streets for a period of time until he had this thing, how does he end up with the Derulo crest on his buttons, on his fancy jacket that he has? And the other thing they show is that he left with nothing, and the jacket that he had was torn to shreds. So that's just a little bit of a plot hole that's come back for me. That's kind of wiggling in the back of my head.
That and the fact that like he has been Percival Derulo with Vox Machina is very much like, okay, at what point in your life did you decide, screw it, I don't care if people know that I'm a Derulo? Was it because it's been so long that people really don't care about the Derulo name? Is it because the Briarwoods have done such an excellent smear campaign of the Derulo name that, you know, it really doesn't matter to him anymore, or what the deal is, that, or just the fact that he's not in high society anymore and you're around a bunch of bums, and when you say, yeah, I'm, you know, Percival Derulo, they just do okay, why do you have several names?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm with you, Travis. That was something that I picked up pretty hard in this episode as well because of our conversation last time. And I've done a lot of, I'm going to air quote this research on the timeline, because it's been bugging me this whole season. It's been bugging me what the timeline is for this. And we seem to be placed somewhere between 5 and 10 years since the invasion of Whitestone. So is that enough time for a family to be completely forgotten, for a crest to be mostly forgotten? I don't know. is it enough time for someone who is a teenager to become an adult and need completely new clothes that don't have buttons of their crest? Absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely an active choice that he has made to keep those buttons on a cloak that he has fashioned to look like his old one, and it begs the question of why.
Yeah.
In some ways, like, he's a very conflicted character.
But there's something behind it, and I agree entirely with that timeline, because today he says that it was 5 years ago that he made the pepper box, and that was sometime after living on the streets. Yep. So within 5 to 10 years seems like a bang on accurate description. 5 year span isn't bang on description of where we're falling within somewhere. So there is, again, for as well as everything's written, there's, even in something as well written as this, there's going to be things that pop up to people that dig deep enough that maybe there is an explanation that we don't know. And it could easily have an explanation of, you know what, he remembered the crest, he went into a buttoneer. When he decided to take his name back, he went into a cloak shop and drew the crest and said, make buttons with this crest on it. Like, it can be easily explained away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But without it, we're left going, why?
Yeah. It is interesting. I found that the Dorolo crest does look very similar to the Everlight symbol and whatnot. There's some interesting similarities to it. So I do wonder whether or not the tree has something to do with that religion, or if it just is interesting happenstance that I'm digging far too much into.
Well, I mean, the tree is being damaged. It has problems that's going on with it. We obviously see it's in a really bad state. It just had bodies hung from it. Is that possibly somewhat? Obviously, the timeline doesn't coincide because Pike lost connection to the Everlight in their battle when they were there personally. But it could have something to do with her inability to connect back to it, because now she's been tainted by the same taint that's on the tree. There could be something tied to it. Speaking of which, perfect segue into the D&D joke. I do have a laundry list of D&D jokes, chat, that I've come up with. I've only got one for tonight. And the one for tonight is, why do paladins prefer chainmail? Because they wear holy armor.
Boo. Boo.
Yeah, there's a bunch coming.
Where is the cue for the gif from Princess Bride with just boo? Yeah.
That's terrible, and you should feel terrible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think there could be some kind of tie-in to... there could be definitely some tie-in to the tree and all of this with Pike and everything moving forward. But, I mean, I needed
one of the things, though,
Pike segue,
that does very much irritate me with Pike's storyline and the side is when that priestess tells her, nothing could ever sever your connection. It's you that's the problem. And I'm just like, okay, but literally Delilah did something. Yeah. This is kind of bullshit that you're swapping over to no, Pike, the problem is you all along. It's no. Yeah, there might be an excuse. There might be something unlocked as far as like something deeper seated in Pike as far as self-esteem issues and shit. But no, don't. I hate it when it's something of the like, oh, it's just you're the problem. Yeah. Something terrible happened to you, and now it's all just your fault.
And you have to figure it out on your own.
Do the thing. And it's like, no, I'm pretty sure Delilah was the one who did some shit here. So up yours.
There's definitely something more to that. Before moving to the next part, I'll just do one more quick one. And why does raw milk increase your perception? Because nothing gets past your eyes.
No. No. No.
Like I said, they are some bangers.
No.
They're from a voice actor.
You said one.
But then I thought I'd just toss in a bonus.
Let's do a bonus!
So we do have the firebrand of the Derulo, Percy saying, no, absolutely not. I'm here to save my sister. Which is amazing because up until like literally maybe half an hour ago, he didn't even know that she was still alive. And now every other plan that he has become completely derailed to save his sister. Which you can see happening, but... and then there's Archie saying, we can do both. And Kestrel is with Professor Andres. And then we have the Scanlan wants to make a distraction. You think I'm annoying? Let me be annoying. And that seemed like another animation from reference in that whole scene. It seemed like it was referencing. I couldn't pick it up, but it seemed like it was reference to another animation style.
It might have been. I'm not sure because I'm not as well versed in that. But I did just love that it was very much the beat, beat, beat with that slow little zoom that was jerky and just fit the mood beautifully.
Yeah, they had a few of those I found in this episode where it was just really well laid out. Like the beats, the cinematography, and like that were really well laid out, and this was one of them where it was just, it felt perfect. It was just like, it's hard to kind of find any flaws in that, how they did that scene.
I am going to just go back ever so slightly because I can, and Billy is going to probably just facepalm with this because we were talking about Archie, who also is voiced by Dominic Monaghan, which makes me incredibly happy because I just love my Lord of the Rings actors anytime they pop up in anything. So it just makes me very happy that Mary is in this. But as someone who has had to write numerous torture scenes, one, I am kind of loving that the missing ear trope is becoming very much a solid fantasy, like, canon trope. It's very much something we hang on to now, and it amuses me. But also it irritates me that he was able, like, he must have the most incredible amounts of adrenaline going through his body to be able to get cracked unconscious into a wall and then aid in his own prison break and then aid in another break and then do all of these things. And I just don't buy it because I hate it when that just kind of happens when they don't have a healer. And he's just okay now. Like, he's got the bandage over his ear, but all of the broken, shattered, dislocated bones that he had from Venmeyer cracking a wall with him irritated me ever so slightly because it's you don't bounce back from that, like, at all.
I mean, I'm going to argue that someone gave him a health potion. So
Health potions suck and are bullshit.
In like an hour, his ear is going to grow back and everything's going to be fine.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the fact that they saw the blood running down the shirt and, like, they kept the continuity with the ear. But yeah, his ear wasn't, like, sliced off with a razor sharp blade that you barely feel it. It was torn from his head. Which is
so the screaming was very appropriate.
Yeah, and really well done. We were talking about how they faded to black, and it was just so well, like, just the sound and just the black screen was beautifully done. But I agree.
Well, and there are some things you don't have to see. Like, you really don't need to see the nitty gritty of the ear being torn off. Like, you saw it starting to separate. It was totally cool and totally fine to go back to the outside of the building and just hear him screaming because very few people, I think, are going to enjoy just watching him get the ear torn off.
Well, and that's actually a question I get a lot in my creative coaching and my writing coaching is how gory is too gory? Where do I cut? How, like, what do I show and what do I hold back on and what do I allude to? And that's a very big question because that is something that can really divide readers very quickly or viewers and something like this. So I think some things they've done that have been a little bit extra, and there's some things like this where it's like, you know what? That made that moment so much more memorable because had we seen the ear get torn off, we would have not wanted to talk about it and we would have moved past it or wanted to move past it. And mentally, people are going to move past it and not want to remember that. This now stands out as an excellent editorial choice in how they did this moving forward. So it was really great. But yeah, so he's surprisingly still alive.
Yeah, he's surprisingly spry for a mutilated, tortured human being. Well, dwarf, whatever he is.
Exactly. And then Scanlan says, or they know they have to go to Professor Andres to get the Kestrel or Cassandra, and Scanlan decides he is going to burn down Vetman's house, the Duke's house, go and apparently they had some really crappy rules for this part of the campaign and what they wanted to do, because everything kind of goes a little bit sideways for him. So they do agree on letting him go, and he proudly proclaims that he is a master destructor.
He's not wrong. And this is kind of for me where, especially in watching it the second time, everything fell apart. Because there's some really great, hilarious moments in it. But there's also a lot of moments where I'm just like, but you have badass enough magic to have solved this problem like 6 different ways. Why are we doing it this way? This is dumb. This is like the worst possible way to do the solution. And it's not just a bad dice roll. Though, yes, like the rain when he's trying to light the hay on fire was like fantastic. Especially when he's trying to do the like up yours, Vax. I can do this shit too. And then it's the unless nature decides to kick my ass again, and never mind.
When he falls off the wall.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot easier. Like the elves, the half elves make it look so simple.
Yeah, they're so spry. They must get it from Archie. But he does go in, and then he immediately has this, what the fuck am I doing? And I agree, there's many ways that he could have gone in, especially with the hand. But I mean, to be fair, he didn't know where the Duke was. There was a kind of an element of surprise for some reason when
Admittedly,
he sees the Duke.
That wasn't my problem. Though that also was one of the like grossest moments in the show for me. It was just a like, for real? Yeah. Really?
I found the
this
second
is up
plop
there with all of
kind
the puke.
Yeah, I found the second plop kind of overdid it. Went over the mark.
Yes.
We had the clear picture of what was happening. We didn't need the silhouette of it too.
We definitely knew he was taking a shit. Like, we didn't need to see it, even if, thank God, it was just silhouetted, because there's a certain level of I don't need to know, and I really didn't need to know the consistency of his poop. I really didn't need to know what the color was on top of that. So thank you for at least allowing it to be silhouetted.
It was like a 3 on the Bristol
Billy,
scale,
and I'm very proud of myself.
I mean, I would actually say that it was probably a 6, 5 or 6. Other direction, it did not seem solid.
No, he needs some maybe additional fiber.
Yeah,
in his diet.
But maybe that's something that we could always look into that and see if, what was the diet of people at that time, and maybe that was an ongoing problem. Look at the fiber intake of occupiers of that time, because all the fields are burned out and dead and gone. So
I'm sure he was not eating necessarily the best food, but given that he also was a wealthy person, probably had significantly better food, and maybe that was the problem, is that it was a little too rich for his GI tract.
Could be.
So,
Billy, the question burning on everyone's mind is this the part that you suggested? And one of the wins for the fans.
No. I can't even remember if that was part of the original the original program. It was a complete shock to me when it happened, and I was just like, oh no. But that first season was very off the cuff, so it could have been. I might have just repressed it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Have we hit any of those moments yet?
We are getting into it. So the biggest part was the stuff that happened inside of the mansion. His transmogrification into the Triceratops was an absolute fan favorite, like epic thing that happened in the campaign. And if you remember in the last episode, he came up with the idea of, I can take all the potions, turn into a bunch of stuff, and like rampage inside
that was in
the prison.
This episode that he talks about that. I thought.
Well, there's because
he
talked about becoming where they're drawing out the plan on the map, and he's like, he'd become Scanbo and have the 2 women hanging off him and be running around just murdering everybody.
Right, and the fans were very scared that was going to be it, that they cut the actual thing happening, and it just turned into theoretic plan. So everyone was very excited when he decided to break into the mansion and start chugging potions and rampage.
So that was one of my biggest problems with the episode, was when he's there in the potions totally made sense. Totally made sense. What got me very much out of the story was when he does pull the scroll out as this big last ditch effort, and he's like, I have read this thing so many times, and he's acting like he doesn't know what it does, or like he doesn't know how to make it work. And it's like, dude, 2 episodes previous you were messing around and became like gorgeous hot human woman Scanlan, and strange unicorn dragon abomination thing, which was fantastic, and like the little toad that Grog squished. So he knows what it does, and yeah, singing it is gonna work more effectively. You're a bard, like, yeah. So it just felt like okay, writers do better. I know you can do better. Why did you do this? And I hated that it was a Triceratops. But
yeah, had nothing to do with the writers. That was actually in game. The characters, like, thinking about what I can do to get out of this situation, and just like any normal human, thought, hey, maybe I can turn myself into a Triceratops.
I mean, sure, I can totally get behind that. It's just that I wish they had updated the dialogue to work better as a story, for it to be more of the, okay, I know what this does when I just speak it. Maybe it's going to be better if I sing it.
So it's actually really interesting because that is added dialogue.
So then it could have been better.
Because in game you can only use those scrolls once.
Yeah.
So I think that was just them trying to make it fit into the show, as you don't want these things to just disintegrate in your hand when you try them or something. I don't know. But yeah. I don't know why they added it like that when it could have just been a fun surprise.
Yeah. I mean, it was a fun way of doing it, and he did go through a lot of transformations when he was doing this. I really loved the point when he threw open the one door and catches a bunch of the guards playing D&D. That was fantastic.
Yes. That was wonderful.
Yeah, but this was one of those moments where it did, because we talked about how it's so well done that at points it almost feels like it's not a cartoon or an animation. It feels like it's like almost like you're watching a live action thing. And this was one of those ones where it was very much akin to like a Warner Brothers kind of goofy cartoon-esque episode, where it's like you really knew that this was just like a goofy cartoon thing, and it worked. It fit, like, it was a sidestep from what they normally do, but it did work, and it was fun to see him go through these trial and errors, and then when the potion is going to wear off and how long they last and what position he's going to be in and how that ends. I had issues with this as well. Like, when I love the fact that he turns into a Triceratops. As soon as I saw it on the wall, I was like, I know what's going to happen. This is going to be amazing. But my first thing was like, he knows that these things don't last long. He knows how long this spell lasts within reason, unless singing it makes it last longer, because he's done it 3 times. Why did he run upstairs? He turned into a master Triceratops. He's killing everything in his path, and instead of like barreling out the front door and getting the hell out of Dodge, he decides to run upstairs and try to break through an upstairs doorway, which is a beautiful ending to the spell, leaving him spinning flat back into a door.
Yeah, doors.
But yeah, that was my thing.
Existence.
Like, why go upstairs? Why would you not, in that form, just... At that point, you kind of have a layout of the castle, and you know you're in the front lobby. But
panic.
A thing. Yeah, but see, that was my thing at first too. I was like, oh, maybe he was just panicking. Maybe this is just, like he became a blind thing. But as soon as he turns into the Triceratops, he actually pauses and goes, nice. Like, he's calm and he recognizes what's happening. And then he starts rampaging.
Yeah, I can understand him getting lost and whatnot. My problem came more once he was on the roof, and he gets to the edge of the roof, and you hang out on the roof until Vedmire shows up and kicks your ass and Then, after you're bloody and hurting, then you use Scanlan Hand. Then you do these things. And then again, after you use penis power Scanlan Hand, you use regular Scanlan Hand to jump off the building and go higher and then fall from higher and you're fine. And so that entire scene was where I was just like, this is bullshit and you could do better. Other than the penis hand magic, because
So the penis power, as you so quaintly put it, that was fan nod number 2.
I assumed. So I knew that like you needed to have that in somewhere, but I feel like how they did it was terrible.
The character in the original campaign often used his penis as a magic wand to cast his spells. That was like his thing. And it was one of those situations where, you know, we're halfway through the series and he hasn't done that. Is this just not going to happen? So it was a fun nod to the campaign, although again, with the arguments that you guys are making, I can see how, as someone who hasn't seen that campaign, how it can take you out of it. Like, it is really random and really effective when it could have been effective minutes ago.
It's really enjoyable and it's a lot of fun to watch, but from a writer's perspective and for the storytelling, the flow of things, it really is. Like, we talked about speed bumps. That was like a mogul in the middle of the story. It has its reasons, and now it makes sense. And again, I don't think it was big enough or bad enough to destroy the story and destroy the storyline, but it definitely was a massive like lump in an otherwise pretty smooth storyline to this point.
And I think the thing too is that when I watched it the first time, you know, if I was watching this the way I watch many things, which is just a one and done often. The first time I watched the episode, it didn't really bother me. It was just okay, we're in a fight. Of course, things happen. And in the rewatching, it was okay, but, and you get nitpicky. So it's not a terrible thing to have these moguls and these speed bumps and whatnot, but they are things that could be done better for sure. And I do love having fan servicey moments. And I think that for a character, penis power is so Scanlan. And I'm going to try and work that in as often as I can during this episode, just because of the reaction that you have.
See, I called it the dick blast, but
yeah, exactly. But it's just I would love to see a better way to have worked that in. And I think that we've seen it done well when you had like Pike do the, you know, she couldn't heal the boy in that first episode because she had healed, you know, party members. And I would have loved if they had just made a moment of him, a bigger moment of him trying to, you know, when he's going to run off the roof, of doing the like, and Scanlan Hand is charging. Damn it. Can't run off the hill, like can't run off the roof, you know, and just make it little moments to help bridge some of these problems, which I feel like they've done a good job of in previous episodes. So it's just that there seemed to be, you know, with this fight and like with the Wraith fight, a couple of moments where it's just the like, okay, we know this could have been done a little bit better because we've seen it be done a little bit better.
Yeah. But I can say from my perspective on that, I completely agree with you. But I've done stories where it's had fan input, where it's had the entire story has been given to me with multiple prompts and a variety of different things. And when you're doing a normal story and all of a sudden there's these really random bits that you need to factor in and fit in, it can become a little bit confounding and a little bit confusing. No matter how talented and good of a writer you are and how well you've done to a certain point, there's some things that can be kind of like, okay, well, like Billy said, scrolls are supposed to disappear. They haven't disappeared. Do we explain that? No, we don't. But we're going to do this. And it's just, so I can see where, not saying that it couldn't have been done better, but I can see where some of the faltering happened and why it may have happened, trying to fit all this random stuff into this one, like into this episode, and again moving forward. But from a perspective of an overall thing, LJ's been 100% right. They've done things like this so well in the past, and written in really weird little quirky things, and it just flowed so naturally that this one, like I said, really was cartoony and stood out from the rest. Yeah.
Yep.
But that's a good point though, with not going off, like not just using the hand right away. And the other thing that struck me too was when he's fighting against the Duke, he ends up getting thrown off of one roof and landing down on the next roof, if I'm not mistaken. And it wasn't that far of a drop. So when he goes running out and he like hits the point like at first, and his toes go to the edge, he does the like, whoa, when he looks down, it's like, well, it looks like it was like a 7-foot drop from when he was battling the Duke. And then there was the other layer that they ran across the next rooftop, and that's when they have the dick blast and everything that comes off from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I don't know, there was a lot happening in that. But there were some fun nods to the fans. There's some fun nods to the fact that it's a D&D game. And was it the Critical Role logo on the back of the board?
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I think so.
It didn't have, I think it was just the skeleton of it, not the full detailed one, just the two outside boxes.
And Matt's voice.
Of course.
At the end.
But I mean, those were things that I did absolutely love about it. And I did enjoy the dichotomy of having, like, other than Grog, like, this is, and other than the Giants, this is, like, the biggest bad guy that you've faced, and you send the littlest person to face him.
Yeah.
And Scanlan does well. You know, I love that once they can see the fire from where they're hiding out, it's the, like, holy shit, he actually did it. That's amazing. And he's like, yeah, he is going to be insufferable in the next episode, like guaranteed, being able to be like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but I absolutely love Grog's reaction to it. It's just such a genuine bursting out laughing when he first comes out with the plan, and he's like, seriously, how do you come up with these things? But there is that, as this whole thing is happening and breaking down, we do flashback once in a while. Hey Paradox, welcome.
Oh,
we
hello.
do flash back once in a while to the rest of the gang, and we have that, again, very touching moment between Vex and Percy, where we have the comparisons of Cassandra being terminally insufferable, or terminally annoying, however you put it, and then Scanlan being the same thing, and the two of them kind of connecting the dots, and then Percy really being forthcoming in how concerned he is for his sister, and then Vex actually cracking a little bit and using that to express in a roundabout way her concern for Scanlan, and actually in the end saying, you know, I hope Scanlan's okay too. But that's one of the times that we actually see Vex really become kind of close to emotional, I guess, instead of just being
She
angry.
lets down a wall or two
Yeah.
in trying to help Percy let down a wall or two.
Yeah.
And I do like her doing the, like, whose stupid idea was it to let Scanlan go off and do these things? And Vax doing the, you let him. And her doing the, never listen to me again. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, kind of showing the de facto leader of the group being.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, when they were all doing the, like, oh yeah, clearly Percy's the leader, it's like, is he? And when they're all doing the, no, I thought I was the leader, it's like, nah, guys, you're all following Vex. She is 100% your group mom and leader in this.
Yeah. Yes. But it was a very touching moment that they had for that. But we
And
also,
also, yeah,
what was that?
after you. After
I
you.
was going to say, we also, in that thing, one thing that we did miss with Scanlan is he finds the war room, and he finds the table with many more villages and towns and cities set to be invaded and attacked and have something happen to them. So we do have the first obvious sign, rather than just suspicion, that there is something much bigger at play than just taking over Whitehaven and making money.
I maintain that there's still something attached to the dragons. I know that, like, that was the prediction I made way back at the beginning,
Yeah.
but it would not surprise me if there is still something as far as a very grand overarching theme where the actual big bad is manipulating both the Briarwoods and the dragons and whatnot in this gigantic conquest of whatever the continent is called.
Yeah. I can see
So,
that
yeah.
because it does seem to be becoming a lot more far-reaching than first anticipated.
Yeah.
And a lot more complex and involved. Because, like, the Duke is working with the Briarwoods, but he also seems to kind of have had his own abilities and his own, like, I guess, permissions to go do certain things as well. Like, it seemed like he was just more than just, like, a hired thug.
Yeah.
There seemed to be more going on behind the scenes with him, which we'll never know now unless they do some kind of flashback. Or unless he somehow survives. That's the thing. We never see the Duke die. He's
Yeah.
left on top of a burning mansion.
Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah,
It's just a little flesh wound.
exactly.
He can survive that.
Scanlan fell from higher.
Yeah, exactly. He's
You
fine.
always have to see the villains die. You always
Yes.
have to see the villains die.
Yeah, that's the thing. And even then, you can't fully trust that the villain is dead. There's usually some messed up stuff happening. But yeah, they have the chat about Cassandra and Scanlan. Scanlan finds the map, turns into Triceratops, goes upstairs, which I don't understand why. And then we, again, talking about anxiety and how they show mental distress and things like that. There's that really cool scene where they're getting tired of waiting before they've seen the fire and the explosion happen from the mansion, where it starts off with Vex basically after having this nice touching moment with Percy to stop clicking the gun.
Yeah.
Stop the clicking. You're pissing us off. You're driving us all nuts. And then we start to see the time is causing anger and irritation and irritability and stuff to start bubbling up back up to the surface within the group.
Which completely understandable. When you're sitting there and you don't know what's going on, the waiting is awful. Like, waiting games are always awful, but especially so when it's something that is so important as rescuing your sister that you didn't even realize was alive until like that day. Yeah, having to wait for the goofball of the group to theoretically give a distraction. Oh, God, that is unimaginably difficult. So the fact that they were actually patient enough to wait for Scanlan is incredible.
But they receive payment for that by taking all of the reward and the acclaim for the plan. When Archie's like, wow, it actually worked. That's an amazing plan. Like, that's what we do. Like, no, Scanlan did it. He had to beat you guys into submission.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Yeah.
Group projects are always like that.
Yeah, exactly. But then they do get to the door, and again, we have another door moment where Vax wants to open it. Vax is like, wait. Or Vex wants to open it. Vax is like, wait, it's probably trapped. And then Grog really is still revved up and pissed off from that ale earlier and just wants to jump in and start smashing heads. And
Yeah. I love it. The smashes it open and then does the, oh, it is a trap. Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Different kind
Of
of trap.
course. Yeah.
exactly. And then he gets riddled with arrows and goes in to the murder rampage, which is absolutely gorgeous. You knew what was
Yes.
coming, you saw it coming, and the payoff, like we talk about in writing, you make promises to your readers, and in this thing, they actually definitely paid off that promise that he was going to go into a murderous rampage, and boy, did he ever.
Yeah. I don't think anyone would have been worried in that moment of, you know, him, all of the arrows being loosed and whatnot. I don't think anyone would have been at all concerned about Grog's well-being. I think it is well enough set up that everyone would have been just sitting there being like, yes, he is gonna be angry now. And yeah, he does a beautiful job.
Yeah, I thought it was summed up pretty good by Vax's next line, which was, "Oh, you're all fucked now."
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you don't shoot the barbarian. Like, you don't shoot the berserker.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't do that.
No, it was beautifully done. And then, so we do have that battle, the end of the battle scene with Scanlan, where he uses Scanlan's hand and fights him off and that blast power and stuff. I just like that line where he's like, "You're small, you lose." And then his line of "what brothels have taught me is it doesn't matter its size, but it's how you use it," was just a nice spin on a very old saying. But the payoff in that saying was so beautiful, as we saw.
Yeah. His little penis power.
Yeah. It floats away and falls. But that rage ends pretty quickly. That rage scene ends when Percy sees Professor Andrus and goes chasing up the stairs and chases him into the room and has a really disturbing, kind of upsetting reunion with his old professor.
And his sister, which is really exciting because you get to see the recognition in her eyes for the first time. As far as you know, she's been under lock and key from the Briarwoods for 5 to 10 years. You assume that she's been told he's dead.
Yep.
So
until recently.
Yeah, right. At the end of the last episode, she's told that there might be news about your brother or something like that.
Well, and just because your brother's here doesn't mean it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
so this is a ghost in the flesh.
Yeah.
Which is delightfully traumatizing especially when it's he left you. So
yeah.
There's a lot to unpack from her perspective of the holy shit, you're here. And then there's always guaranteed the why did it take you so long? So that would be interesting. Except, Anders does a okay job with slitting her throat.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing, is that they did this scene. I felt the scene was drawn out beautifully. Because he pops in, there's a shock on both of them, there's the pause of everything, and then Anders breaks it up by saying, always to class early, and puts the knife up to her throat. And then there could have been this really long, exaggerated, drawn out conversation back and forth, or a tense face-off going back and forth multiple times. And I found that they kind of hit that tone really quick, really nicely. It was a nice draw out. It was a nice play out of that scene. The slice, her collapse. Again, don't see her die. We see her collapse. But there's a fair bit of blood. But I put down in big capital letters across my thing, is the mirror scene. Because that, to me, the cinematography in that scene, where she's bent forward, blood pouring out of her neck, Anders behind her, just that whole thing, and the coloring of it was just absolutely gorgeous. I think of all the animation of the entire episode, that one scene has got to have been my favorite.
Mm-hmm. It was really beautifully done. I am going to preface this once again with I am a writer who has killed a lot of characters. And pro tip, this is just trachea and esophagus. You're not killing anyone, not quickly, by cutting this. It's here, and it's here. That's where you'd actually would bleed out from relatively quickly. So it just drives me ever so slightly crazy when you get the little cut across the throat, and it's just like, that's survivable. Put a Band-Aid on it, you're fine.
But that's the thing, is they're not about quickness here. And he hates the kids. So I would say that he would do that on purpose.
You're not killing somebody doing that. I think this is more about the fact that, generally speaking, the average viewer thinks that if you slit somebody's throat like this, that they're going to die.
No, but it makes a really cool whistling effect.
Yeah. There are pros and cons to it. It's not a deadly maneuver going across there. Not unless you're doing it like they did in Black Death, where it is much gorier and is more of a half decapitation. But yeah.
So I guess I would argue for both ways. Knowing that this is Professor Anders and he has been teaching the children forever, you have to assume he knows the anatomy of the neck and knows where to cut. So that makes me think, hey, he knows it's very deliberate what he's doing. But at the same time, we're not Professor Anders. So it could have just been, an oversight of the writers or the subject matter.
I think it's just an oversight of the artists.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like in canon, I would think, this guy knows what he's doing and he's sadistic enough to do it.
Yes. Canonically, if we're going to find a reason for it, would be we're going to make her bleed out as slowly as possible, but still mortally.
Yeah.
So that you have as much trauma for Percy as possible, because you do see that. The shock on his face, the paralyzing shock, is beautiful.
And the idea that, now that he's done that, he still has to face off against Percy. Yeah. Like, that was, in a sense, that was his bargaining chip, and he just threw it away for whatever reason. So you got to assume that he wanted to make some kind of psychological dent in Percy to have the upper hand. Otherwise, what's he doing? Percy has a gun.
and against Cassandra as well, because as she's laying there, she's suffering and in pain, and has time to think all these thoughts and to see all this stuff. And again, it's backing Percy into a terrible corner, because we just heard him say, the only thing that matters right now is saving my sister. Well, now you can't. She's just had her throat slit. She is very slowly and excruciatingly bleeding out in front of you. And you can't save her because you have to fight the monster that did this. So there's a psychological trauma. There's a lot that ties into this. But I think this comes down to the crest on the buttons kind of thing. Of we can build out what it is and build the story for them around it and be completely wrong or be close to the mark. Or it could just be, just an oversight. And
Yep. I am excited to see in the next episode, because it does end with her still alive and him just frozen and paralyzed and having all of those emotions of he's seeing his sister for the first time in 5 to 10 years, who he thought was dead. So now it's he's seeing her alive and then seeing her dying. And I'm sure that Anders is going to be using this moment as a getting out of the classroom, getting somewhere else that is more advantageous for him, unless the classroom is really advantageous. But it buys him time, because what are you going to do? You're seeing your sister for the first time in 10 years and she's dying in front of you. Do you go to her and try to staunch the bleeding, do whatever healing stuff you have, if you have any, all of that kind of stuff? Or do you just chase after Anders and go kill him and just leave her dying out on the floor? And I'm really excited to see the choices that they make in the next episode. I'm really excited to see if Percy's paralysis continues. Hi, Chekhov.
Yeah.
I'm told that it's past 6 o'clock and I'm supposed to take medications.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Hey.
Such a helpful thought.
He's a good boy.
But
Sometimes.
Yeah, he was very, very frozen. And I found that, again, the animation in that scene was really cool, the way they did it at the end. But yeah, it's this, again, they brought the storyline along really beautifully. It was a lot of setting up. If you look back, from my perspective, looking back to the episode and what we just discussed, a lot of these things were laying the groundwork for things yet to come in this episode. And it makes sense. The first episode after the halfway mark brings us to a certain point, and then the first episode is back, is going to set the groundwork for the rest of the episodes laying in front of us. Kind of a re-promise to the fans as to what they can expect to come forward.
Agreed.
Blood, guts, gore, and penis magic.
Yeah. Who doesn't love penis magic?
And people on the can.
Apparently.
Okay, we can do without that. I'm okay never seeing any more poop in this episode or in this series.
Yeah.
I don't want to have a feces counter to go with our puke counter.
Well, I mean, if it's like the puke counter, it's just going to stay stalled after this episode.
One hopes.
Paradox. What?
Oh, man. So the first episode, what? Penis magic. There's a moment where instead of Scanlan using Scanlan hand, it's Scanlan hand magic, but it shoots from his dick
and blasts
the
bad guy away, who's straddled over top of him.
Yeah.
About to land the killing blow.
Also, I really did appreciate their little nod to Ghostbusters by calling him Venkman and then doing the Vedmire because that was cute.
And for those of you who may be joining us that aren't aware of what the After the Roll Legend of Vox Machina talk show is, Billy, if you can point to your green chair to that message at the bottom, the other way, to your nod ring hand. There we go. Where it says warning mature themes discussed by immature people. Which is why instead of just reading it, I had Billy try to point it out.
Just pointing in all directions at all things.
Yeah.
Whenever
I did
possible.
play the Scarecrow. So.
There we go. And did a fantastic job.
Still the best Scarecrow I've heard.
Yep. And as people who watch After the Roll may recognize, Billy is now rocking the new hairstyle.
Which is very Scanlan.
Yes.
And
It is.
I love it.
And ties in beautifully to our banner just below, which is nice. So, but all in all, it was a good episode. It was setting up a lot of stuff to move forward, and I enjoyed it. But again, it wasn't one of my favorite. I kind of lumped this one back in with the first episode. I think like we're kind of saying
It's a very transitory episode. Like important things happened, but also like I'm really excited for like the next episode.
Yeah.
I also want more Silas and Delilah. The fact that they weren't in this episode at all was just like excuse you.
Yeah, and Pike.
Where's
was
my
MIA.
favorite necromancer vampire sorcery couple?
Exactly. And Pike was MIA in this episode as well.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I find that there are a lot of as writers, we always talk about the saggy middle bits. Your second book of a trilogy, the middle of any novel that you're writing, you really have to work hard to avoid the saggy middle and the part where things kind of fall down. And if this is the saggy middle of this series, then I'm okay with that. I think that's still a pretty damn good saggy middle.
It was still very entertaining. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for, really.
Yeah, this is easily my number 2 episode.
Well, you have reason for it to be number 2, though. Because I think had I had the opportunity to watch all of this from the beginning...
Damn it, Billy!
Then... Oh, wait a minute. Damn. Okay.
You were...
Yeah, that one went over my head.
Well, at least it didn't go between your legs.
God, I hate you both.
How did I get lumped into this?
You gave me 2 dad jokes earlier. You get lumped in.
But they were killer dad jokes. They were D&D dad jokes. You
does
both
not
should
make
have
it
seen,
better.
You should have seen my reaction when I stumbled across this person, who is a voice actor, and she's got bright green hair, actually the same color hair that Billy just had. And she does these TikToks of just other stuff, but mainly D&D dad jokes. And I was over the moon when I came across this. I couldn't believe the luck that I was bestowed upon me.
No.
Oh, there's more coming.
I know. I know.
So.
But yeah, no, it was an episode.
It was. Again,
That's for sure.
it was fun. And that's the other thing. If you take away from the abnormalities in the writing and the things that were different from how they've been doing things along the way, it was a fun episode. And knowing that it does give a nod to the fans and some of these other things, and they've all worked it into this one really cool. We did get to see Scanlan's plan that was laid out previously. And if you look at it from that, and look at it from the drawing that they used for the plan, is kind of how it played out. So it kind of ties in really well. If you look at that, it was a fun, silly episode, and it was great to see it that way. But for the stodgy writer's perspective, it was a little bit of an abnormality from the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to use stodgy. It's always a good day when you get to use stodgy.
Yes. I was just gonna go with pedantic again because that's me.
There we go. So, what was that?
I'm difficult to please when it comes to writing, so therefore, the fact that I've liked any of them has been I would say a nod to the fact that it's generally quite well done.
Yeah. I can be very
I'll take
difficult.
that as a win.
There you go.
Yes.
I can be very difficult to please in writing as well. And there's a bookstore, Chapters Indigo. They were giving away free DC comics. Just a little sidebar. I'm not going to say who the writer was or the editor or anything like that because I want to save them embarrassment. But it was this free black and white comic, and it is done as a choose your own adventure. And it is one of the worst things I have ever read. The writing was wildly off-brand. Everything behind it, like it's Batman is chasing the Riddler into a funhouse maze, and it's like, does Batman chase him into the maze? And then if you go to the panel that says no, he doesn't, then the next panel is, because that's the start, is, oh no, the Riddler's ran into this maze. Should Batman follow him? If you say no, then it says Killer Croc has killed and eaten every single orphan from all of the orphanages in Gotham because Batman didn't go in after the Riddler. And then the next panel is Batman on his hands and knees saying, oh no, I am so terrible. All of the orphans are dead. I need to retire, not only because I don't have a further supply of Robins, because Robin was always an orphan. This is on the first page of this thing.
What?
Like, what am I reading?
Wow.
Okay. That's something, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It
Okay,
was-
yeah,
That's a
pro
legitimate-
tip.
That's a legitimate reason to retire. Lack of Robins.
Yeah, it was just, and then I was driving, so my wife read through and kind of tried to piece together some of the stuff, and it was just so odd, like out of left field for everything that is Batman and DC Comics. Like it was, I don't know, I can't even describe it. It was interesting. I understand why they're giving it away for free, but yeah. Anyways, so writing can be tricky.
Writing's hard. If it wasn't, then everyone would do it and do it well.
Yeah, I love the fact you added in and do it well.
Yes.
That's the key thing. Excellent. So we're going to be back next week for the next episode and rolling on with that. There has been some information. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention, but Wheel of Time has been dropping some really awesome stuff. They've hired on some new performers. There's some new hints and clues and stuff that have been coming out, and it looks like it's going to be very exciting. And apparently, it may be spring. From what I hear,
Spring?
Yeah, I've heard rumors about it being spring.
2023?
No, this
or
year,
2022?
like in the next couple of months. Like it's either going to be in the next couple of months or in the fall, which I'm personally leaning more towards the fall because they're not dumb in how they roll things out. And if they haven't announced or even given a teaser for season 2 yet, I can't see them rolling it out in the next 2 months.
Isn't the Rings of Power coming out in the fall, though?
I thought that was coming out in the spring.
In the spring.
Oh, is that coming out in the spring?
Yeah, so that might be
Uh,
another reason to push this back
Yeah.
into the fall to see what happens with it. But it's going to be interesting to
Yeah.
see. But more things to talk about, more stuff coming. But next week we're going to be back with more After the Roll. Any last thoughts on this episode?
When all
I'm just
around
going to say
you-
penis power again because there was penis power.
When all around you seems bleak and you've got no more strength to fight, just remember the penis power.
And all the lessons you've learned in the brothels.
Mm-hmm.
I might be screwed. But,
Yeah. I'm going to leave that
Yeah.
one alone. So many scandalous
Where's the
jokes.
mature button thing again? It's down there, right?
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So many Scanlan jokes. All right, so
Yeah.
everyone, this has been After the Roll, Legend of Vox Machina, Season 1, Episode 7, breaking down and discussing Scanbo. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back next Monday to break down Episode 8. Title to be remembered next week.
Yeah.
So thank you to my co-host, and we'll catch you all again very soon. And we're going to end broadcast here.